Good morning, everybody. We would wish to outline to Queenslanders the latest on the 4 key challenges of this weather event: waves, wind, rainfall and flooding. What's critical for people to understand across the large scale that we're dealing with, it's a large area and a large population, and it's important that we update people on what is occurring. You will experience at least one of those key 4 challenges: waves, wind, rainfall and or flooding, and it's important that Queenslanders prepare for that. I want to address the cyclone intensity. It remains as a Category 2, and obviously we have seen the delay in the system heading towards the coast. Literally in the last few minutes we've been updated that that could now push into Saturday morning. So if we just unpack where we've been, we overnight saw the system spin around on itself, and then it has resumed its journey into the coast. So exactly where it will hit and when still remains unknown, but all of the modelling continues to show it is coming towards the coast, albeit it has pushed into the early hours of Saturday morning just in the last few minutes. With every hour that approaches, your window to get prepared closes, but you still do have time. And it's important, if you are hearing these messages for the first time, that you do take it seriously, as are we. But I assure you the preparations are in place, and if you do your bit, you will get through this. We're asking Queenslanders to be aware of 2 types of flooding, and as the cyclone approaches the coast, I want to address both of those. The first is storm tide flooding. That's the importance that we explain why that is so pivotal. If the system crosses the coast, particularly on a high tide, there is the real risk of inundation in those storm tide areas. Now, on our website, disaster.qld.gov.au, all of the local governments have what they call their dashboard, and if you click on your local government, there are maps that show different scenarios, and if you are in one of those storm tide areas. If that is the case, you need to make a plan, and it is important that you do have a plan in place to deal with that. Now, I'll get onto that in a moment, but I just want to restate that website address. It's so disaster.qld.gov.au. The second flooding is flash flooding and river flooding, and again, councils do a lot of work in the mapping on that. Now, many Queenslanders in the southeast are aware of this. They have experience in this and have handled it very well over the years. It is important that you do that and check that message across the platform. Know your plan. It is important that you develop your plan now if you are in one of these zones. There are 25 refuge locations open at the moment across all of those councils. I just want to be clear, they are not ideal places to have to spend the night. Ideally, if you are in one of those zones and you choose to go, the best place is with friends or family. If you have the means, and you can go to a motel, but if you don't have that means, if those options aren't available to you, those evacuation centres are there for you to get you out of harm's way, and that information is on that website. For people with this information, I just have to make the following point. If you are not in one of these zones, and that is the vast majority of Queenslanders, the safest place for you is in your home. And I want Queenslanders to understand that every little bit of preparation you do now will make a world of difference as the system approaches and crosses the coast. It's the little decisions and the little actions you take today that make a world of difference. Do another check around your yard, have a look if there are loose items which could become a projectile. If you do have a window to remove anything that could be of danger, please do so. Have a look inside, get your valuable items together. If you do have to leave, it's imperative that you've got your passport and your driver's licence and any of those key identification means, because that helps you get back on your feet after an event. Do you have bottled water and food? They are the little things that make a world of difference. My message to Queenslanders today is that we will continue in every way, shape and form to explain the system as it comes and as things change, and the when and where will continue to remain unknown. As we get that information, we will give it to you. The area at the moment is still between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. That zone will tighten as it gets close. I do want Queenslanders to be mindful that the southern part of that system will provide many challenges, but right across that area, please do your preparations now. We have a plan in place, and we're asking you to have a plan in place as well. And if you do, you will get through this event. History has shown that, and we have seen how well Queenslanders at the other end of the state have handled these events over the years. And whilst it is rare, they have occurred in the southeast as well. And Queensland is a resilient state. And I have every faith that people can handle this event, and we will continue to provide the information to you. I want to turn to some of our focus areas. So I want to start with door knocking. Mass door knocking over the last few days has occurred. I want to sincerely thank not just the local governments who have led it, but also police, fireys, SES, all of the emergency services personnel who have helped in that endeavour. There have been a great level of awareness that has been brought from that. That is just one place where you get your information. I mentioned that website before, disaster.qld.gov.au, but there will be text messages that will be sent. There is up-to-date information on that website. The Bureau of Meteorology will continue to update people. It's important that you use a raft of platforms to get that message. Power outages. We are starting to see the first of the power outages following some gale force winds. That is predominantly where trees have started to knock over power lines. We'll see more of that, and I want Queenslanders to know that we will get them reconnected as quickly as possible. Right now, crews from Energex are actually reconnecting as quickly as they can while it is still safe to do so, but we have pre-positioned a really large number of staff who are ready to assist. And we even have those contractors who will be there to clear the trees so those electricity staff can go and reconnect power. We've done the preparation, and we want Queenslanders to know that there'll be no daylight between the response and the recovery. That's our commitment to you, and we're asking Queenslanders to do the little things now in your preparations, which will make a world of difference for that recovery. We would expect to see numbers of power outages continue to rise as the system gets closer, and as the winds and the rain and indeed the storm surge gets closer as well. Schools. There are 1,030 schools closed today, and there will be that same amount closed tomorrow. As I said, we have continued to make sure we provide that information the day before so that parents are able to plan. I want to thank the staff and students and parents who attended school yesterday and the way that they have prepared for today as well. There are 324 early childhood centres that are also closed. The bulk of that information is on the disaster website. You can Google schools Queensland closures as well, but we'll continue to provide that updated information, but we'll do it the day before to ensure that you have the information to prepare what you need to continue with your lives. Transport, roads and bridges. We are endeavouring on the roads and bridges that we control to keep them open for as long as possible. That is absolutely essential for those key workers. As the system continues to move in, my message to Queenslanders is if you don't have to be on the road, the best place is at home. But it's important that we keep roads and bridges open for as long as we can so that those heroes who serve you are able to get to you. And we'll continue to discuss that. Public transport is closed today and tomorrow. And again, we'll keep people posted on that. Regarding aviation, the airlines are talking directly to their passengers. We thank them for that. And those closures and reopenings is done between the airports, the airlines, with the information that they get from the Bureau of Meteorology. Turning to health. Elective surgery will not be in place today or tomorrow, but the hospitals remain open for emergency procedures. We've actually rostered to make sure that can occur, and I do want to thank the health staff, many of whom will be in fact spending their time at those hospitals and overnighting in many cases to be able to then serve the community the day after. We have also got extra ambulance officers who are now in shift, ready to go to help you. The best thing you can do for them is stay home if you're out of those flooding zones, stay safe, and I assure you they'll be there to serve you if you are needed. Supermarkets, we continue to give the information to supermarkets about the weather system, and they are making their decision to open on a case-by-case basis based on a raft of things, including their access to their staff. We thank those workers who are going in today to pack shelves, man checkouts, ensure that Queenslanders can get that last-minute goods, and we want to thank them very, very much for that. 34 water treatment plants are in place across the area. They have all been fortified. Backup generators are there. Every capacity has been put in place to try to keep them online. In disasters, it's those things that we take for granted every day that really make the difference. Things like power and water and the ability to get around roads. And we have to do everything we can to make sure we get a fighting chance to get them back up and running as quickly as we can. To vulnerable people, I want to thank the way that we have worked across levels of government and indeed the private sector, particularly with aged care. There's been a full assessment done on any of the aged care homes that are in vulnerable areas that are potentially subject to that storm tide or those river flooding, and things have been put in place, plans have been put in place to make sure that those Queenslanders are kept safe, as we have with the homeless. And work continues with the department offering accommodation for those people on a short-term basis. That will continue to be offered to them, and that work continues today. As we get the latest analysis from the Bureau of Meteorology and all of those other agencies, we will give it to you. And the information I provided about the delay of the crossing potentially into the early hours of Saturday morning is only minutes old. As we get it, you'll get it. And I want Queenslanders to know we are taking this seriously, and we're asking you to do the same. We will provide you the latest information. I just want everybody to know the kind of support that we have received. Firstly, the amount of phone calls I have received from mayors, councillors, community members from North and Far North Queensland, people who are picking up the pieces from their own disaster to wish us well, tells you everything you need to know about this state. And I want those people to know your recovery will continue in earnest, and we will get the job done for that magnificent part of the state. I have received messages from almost every state and territory Premier and Chief Minister. I got a message from the Prime Minister of New Zealand, so from across the country and across the ditch, people wishing us well in our hour of need, and that's pretty special. I've spent a bit of time on the ground yesterday, and the message is certainly getting out there, and I want to thank people for that. Great stories as well of people reaching over the back fence for the first time. Neighbours helping neighbours and strangers helping strangers, and that's really important at the moment. There would be a number of people who've only moved recently to Queensland, and this is their first experience of something like flooding, for example. And there are many people who have never been through a cyclone. But I assure you, if the preparation is in place, you will get through this. And we've done our bit, and we'll continue across all levels of government, across all those agencies. And if you do the right thing and the small things at home, I do have every faith that we will get through this as a state. And I want to hand over now briefly to Matt from the Bureau for an update, but I want to thank Queenslanders for the way they have responded during a difficult time.
Thanks, Premier. Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains a Category 2 system and is currently 280 kilometres east of Brisbane. It is moving west at 10 kilometres per hour towards the southeast Queensland coast. Overnight, Tropical Cyclone Alfred, and in fact briefly doubled back on its path. Its current movement has resumed that westward track towards the coast. This erratic movement has resulted in a delay to the forecast crossing. It approaches the outer islands very late on Friday and then is expected to cross the coast in early hours of Saturday, with the most likely track still between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast near Brisbane as a Category 2 system. A Category 2 system means winds near the centre of 95 kilometres per hour and gusts possibly up to 150 kilometres per hour, particularly for those exposed locations around the southern flank of the system. A tropical cyclone warning remains in place from Double Island Point to south of the Queensland-New South Wales border, and coastal hazard warnings for large waves, abnormally high tides and severe weather, as well as flood watches, remain in place. In terms of the coastal crossing, that is important, but let's talk about the impacts from the system, because it's not right to get hung up on the coastal crossing. The wind impacts, we're already seeing those start to develop on the exposed locations along our coasts, with gusts reaching 80 to 90 kilometres per hour already. We're expecting those to continue to develop into this evening, and then increasing to those destructive wind gusts up to 150 kilometres per hour as Alfred approaches the coast. And again, particularly about those exposed areas on the southern side of the track. Large swells and powerful waves have been observed along the Queensland coast for several days now. And the wave recorder off of the Gold Coast recorded a 12.3 metre maximum wave height late yesterday. That is a record for that site. Coastal hazard warnings for damaging surf and abnormally high tides continue for south of Sandy Cape. Tropical Cyclone Alfred continues to produce the risk of a significant storm surge. And again, that is most likely around the southern side of the system. This means as the system crosses the coast, we may see sea levels half to 1 metre above the normal highest astronomical tides. And if the system crosses at exactly high tide, there is the risk of seeing storm surges up to 1.5 metres, particularly around the Redlands Bay area and the Gold Coast. In terms of rainfall, Tropical Cyclone Alfred is expected to produce heavy to locally intense rainfall over southeast Queensland from late today through to at least Saturday. With daily rainfalls total of 200 to 400 millimetres, this could mean totals of over 800 millimetres for this event. In terms of flooding, that rainfall is expected to produce both flash and riverine flooding, and both of these types of flooding can be life-threatening. Flood watches are current across the Mary, the rivers of the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, as well as the upper and lower Brisbane, the Logan and Albert rivers, and also the Condamine and McIntyre rivers. Those flood watches are likely to be upgraded to warnings as we move through today and the system approaches. So in summary, Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains a Category System 2. Its movement did slow overnight, but it is, as I said earlier, it is now currently continued that movement back towards the southeast Queensland coast. So the hazards including the wind, rainfall, storm surge and flooding remain, and we expect them to develop through the day today and then increase as the system approaches the coast. What we've seen overnight in terms of the erratic movement of the system reiterates the fact that this is an evolving situation, and the Bureau will update our warning products as this system evolves, particularly as it approaches the coast. So I urge the community to stay up to date with those warnings via the Bureau app and our webpage, as well as obviously the messaging from emergency services. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Well, it's obviously been an anxious week, a difficult week for people in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. I door-knocked parts of the northern Gold Coast yesterday, was able to speak to a number of residents. So impressed by the planning that is going on at that household level. People are preparing, they're aware of the risk, they're taking the steps necessary to ready their property, and they're looking after their neighbours. And I want to thank all of the people who are out there listening to the warnings that are being provided by the Premier, by emergency services personnel, by Premier Minns, and taking the steps necessary to look after the safety of themselves and their families. You can tell from the report that you've heard this morning from Premier Crisafulli that there is an enormous amount of work going on. I want to thank all of the personnel, police, emergency responders, council workers, utility workers who stepped in and are really doing everything they can to prepare this state for what is to come. I want to give a brief update on the steps that the Commonwealth are taking. As I've said on many occasions, we do not lead this event. The Queensland Government is leading this event here. The Minns Government is leading it in New South Wales, but we want to be the very best partners that we can be, and when resources are requested, we're keen to make sure that we are able to support states in this regard. This morning, the Prime Minister indicated that ADF personnel will be available in Queensland to support police and SES to identify and support people after the event, particularly people at risk. They will be supported in turn by high clearance vehicles to allow them to move around in the conditions that we expect to occur after the cyclone makes landfall. In addition, 2 light utility helicopters will be provided again after crossing to support search and rescue activities. On the financial side, in New South Wales, the Albanese and Minns governments have activated disaster assistance to a range of communities impacted by Tropical Cyclone Alfred. And I want to step through them. They include the following LGAs: Ballina, Bellingen, Byron, Clarence Valley, Coffs Harbour, Dungog, Kempsey, Kyogle, Lismore, Lord Howe Island, Mid Coast, Nambucca Valley, Port Macquarie Hastings, Richmond Valley, and my hometown of Tweed. Here in Queensland, we've obviously also indicated that we are making similar kinds of support available for councils to undertake counter-disaster operations and very early works to clean up. And those are for councils located between Gympie and the Gold Coast. The Prime Minister indicated this morning that he has received an additional request from Premier Crisafulli, and he intends to make a decision about that shortly, and I think you can see from his remarks that he looks upon that request very favourably. We are determined to provide the resources that are necessary to help Queenslanders, to help the people of northern New South Wales. We're grateful for the collaborative way that Premier Minns and Premier Crisafulli, their ministers and their officials are working with us. Our final message, I think, is to the people at home. You've heard this morning from the bomb that this remains a very serious situation. You've heard the Premier ask you to take responsibility for your own safety, to listen to the warnings, to take the steps that are necessary to prepare your family and your home, and most importantly, to look after the people around you, your neighbours, your friends, check in on them, see if they need assistance. I am very confident that if we all do these things, if government prepares, if community prepares, we can get through this. Thank you.
Good morning. The Premier spoke about the 4 challenges of this event, and we're continuing our preparation activities and using the time available to us to ensure the emergency services are pre-positioned to be able to provide that immediate support right from the Sunshine Coast through to the Gold Coast area. However, while we continue to prepare for the winds and the storm surge, it's also important that the community start preparing for the rainfall that we've heard the bomb predict, which will bring both flash flooding and riverine flooding over the next couple of days. The local governments, our state agencies, the disaster coordination centres are working together to ensure that we can communicate and the community understand those risks and can start preparing for that flash and riverine flooding as well as the onset of the cyclone. We're ensuring sufficient resources are available to support the community through door knocking, through messaging. Not only now, we've been out doing that and there's been a huge amount of door knocking undertaken by our emergency services, but also ensuring that those resources are available over the next coming days to get out there and door knock and message the community regarding also the riverine flooding risk and the flash flooding risk. As we heard, our requests to the Commonwealth have been supported, and I'm really grateful for that, and that will ensure that those ADF resources are able to be integrated with our emergency services immediately and ensure that capability is ready to go as required. The SES has over 350,000 sandbags currently in their position ready to be deployed. A separate 403,000 sandbags were distributed yesterday to our local government areas, and another 300,000 sandbags have arrived this morning. Now, this is really important not only to ensure the community can prepare for that storm surge flooding that they've been preparing for and the onset of the cyclone, but also for that flash flooding and riverine flooding that may occur over the next few days from the rainfall that is predicted. Can I please say, if you're at risk of that riverine flooding, go onto the dashboard website, the link to your local council dashboard, and do the planning now. Have a plan not only for the cyclone, but the rainfall that we're going to see following that cyclone, because there won't be a huge gap in between. We will see the cyclone come through and we will see the rainfall immediately follow. If you're at risk of flash or riverine flooding, please don't take unnecessary risks. Do not drive through the floodwater, and please consider your safety. That risky behaviour of driving through floodwaters not only puts you at risk, your family at risk, but it really does put all of our emergency services at risk. Thank you.
Good morning. The Queensland State Emergency Service is actively engaged around the region, helping Queenslanders prepare for what will be a severe event. In the last 24 hours, we've received over 1,300 requests for SES assistance, many of those for vulnerable people, and the majority related to sandbagging and other preparation activities. We have well over 2,000 trained SES volunteers that live in the region, and we've reinforced them with a further 100 that have come down from far North Queensland and North Queensland. Interestingly, most of those that come down are very, very experienced in cyclones, and they've been sharing their experience and knowledge, which has assisted our preparations greatly. In terms of sandbagging, our local government has been proactive in taking the opportunity to keep many of their sandbagging centres open today, and we're working with them. SES is helping facilitate the supply of empty sandbags to those facilities. And I can confirm that this morning we've distributed an extra 250,000 sandbags to local governments to support the continued operation of those centres. And as the Assistant Commissioner said, we have more ready in reserve because the need for sandbags will continue past the crossing of the cyclone, with flooding and heavy rain expected. I can also confirm that the 4 truckloads of sandbags supplied by NEMA have been distributed and are now in the hands of local government, and we appreciate that very timely and useful support from the federal government. Just in closing, as the system moves closer, I want to take this opportunity to remind people to prepare themselves, to check on their families, and if they know of anyone that might be vulnerable, to check in on them. The SES is available for support to assist in the preparation and during the emergency itself. The way to request SES assistance is to use the SES hotline 132 500, 132 500. Of course, if it's a life-threatening situation, then 000 is the best means to use. But SES remains here ready to support Queenslanders.
Good morning. Currently in the Energex area, particularly Redland and Gold Coast, we've got 5,000 outages of customers. That's increased only in the last couple of hours. It was about 8 o'clock, there was about 1,500. We expect those outages to increase as the wind comes onto the coast more. We've got staff in the field repairing as we speak. They'll only be able to continue to do so while it's safe with wind speeds, but we'll keep working in today and hopefully in tomorrow. There's also outages across the Tweed, in several thousand in the Tweed across to Lismore. I don't have all that data. There's 1,200 staff in the Energex patch that are responding now and will respond over the next couple of days. I've also got 800 staff in the outskirts of SEQ to come in and respond as we need. So there's 2,000 people out there. That's lineys, vegetation people, safety people, and all the gear that they need. The other thing I'd like to touch on, there's been a bit of social media around Energex turning off power. It's just completely false. It's fake news. We're dealing with it. We don't turn off power in these sort of outages. Mother Nature does enough of that for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Over to you guys. Thanks very much.
There are lots of homeless people just this morning questioning how to get to these refuge shelters. Is there a plan to physically move them given public transport isn't?
Yes, there is, and staff from the department will continue to go out there and offer any support. I just want to be clear, there is the Department of Housing, the Queensland Department, has put in enough provisions to be able to house any vulnerable person who takes the offer up. Those offers have been made over the course of the last couple of days. There is also a homelessness hotline, and I can get that information and I'll share that socially with Queenslanders as well. There is a hotline if people want to call, but those provisions are in place and every effort will be made to assist those people to get from a park to accommodation if they require.
Even just this morning, they were saying they didn't have those answers.
So the department has been there across the last couple of days. Not everyone has accepted the offer, and we will continue to make that offer to them. My view is that during a disaster event, how you treat vulnerable people is a mark of the kind of society that you are, and it is important that if there's someone in an aged care home, they need to be given every opportunity to be safe, and likewise if there's someone who's sleeping rough. Now, I've spoken a lot about my vision for housing in this state, and I'm, obviously at the moment we're focused on a disaster recovery, but we do need to provide more housing, and that's a long-term goal of mine. But in the short term, there must be provisions for people who are in a vulnerable position. The department will continue to do that and offer that. Now, not all of those offers have been accepted for a raft of reasons, and I'm sure you understand that, but we'll continue to make those offers.
What about aged care homes? Is extra support being offered to them?
Yes, there is, and not only, it's a good question, not only is there an analysis done of those aged care homes that are in a vulnerable place, but we also then work with those providers to work out what is the best provision for those elderly people in those homes. Wherever possible, you don't want to move elderly people wherever it's safe to do so. So often it's a case of, can we get them to a higher level? Are we able to have power in place in case there's vulnerabilities with some of their generation at flood level? So all of that analysis is done, but I can assure you if they are in a place where they are unsafe, proactively they will be moved, obviously as a last resort, but our determination is to make sure that everybody is given the best chance to get through this. And again, I am extremely confident that the provisions are in place that can ensure that Queenslanders are kept safe during this event, and I'm urging Queenslanders to do the same. And I've been through a few cyclones, and I can assure you that you can get through them. It's just every little bit of work that you do at the moment makes a world of difference at the other end. And because the cyclone's approach to the coast has slowed, despite the fact that it remains a Category 2 in intensity, it's given Queenslanders a little bit more of a window just to double check and triple check your processes, know your evacuation plan, make sure that you've cleared everything as best you can. It has given a little bit more of a window to further improve things, and we've made the most of that window from our provisions as well.
You mentioned, might be one for the Bureau, but
sure.
With this system sitting out over the ocean where it is now, does that lead to more intensity? Does it lead to more rainfall in the long term? And could we see the system linger over the southeast for longer?
Matt, that's one for you, but I'll make this observation. The moment we get information, I assure you Queenslanders will get it, and just showed that in the last few minutes. It may change. That's the nature of cyclones. But I take the view that every bit of information we can give people allows them to be able to prepare for whatever that circumstance is, continue to prepare for the worst. That's the best way you can be with these events, and we'll continue to make that information public, as Matt will do right now.
Thanks. So the question was around the lingering nature of the system out over the ocean. It is a Category 2 system. Confident about that analysis right now. There was some concern yesterday that may further develop into a Category 3. The chances of that have reduced. As it approaches the coast, that slow movement is a concern in terms of the rainfall and the potential flooding from that, although the latest guidance has similar rainfall around the southern side of the system as it impacts the coast. So there's not an appreciable change in the expected rainfall. It's just a little bit later for the onset of the really heavy rain as the system moves across the coast.
As it does cross, how long could it stay on top of wherever it does cross? And could that be a matter of hours where we do get that heavy rain and continued wind?
Absolutely, it'd be more than a matter of hours, particularly with the rainfall. The actual crossing of the coast is likely to be sort of a 3 to 6 hour, but let's just really hone in on that as the system approaches. As we see that radar imagery and the satellite imagery confirm the movement as it crosses, because typically tropical cyclones as they cross are very erratic. So we'll watch that very closely. But we are expecting 2 days, perhaps 2.5 days worth of rainfall as the system both approaches and then weakens and moves inland. So right through later today, through Friday and into Saturday, we're expecting to see those high rainfall amounts, and the riverine flooding will follow that. The flash flooding will be as that rain falls. So that's a really concerning feature of the system for those areas that get under that really heavy rainfall.
Is there a possibility it could linger on top for more than that 6 hour time frame?
There is always the possibility that the system can slow down further, and that's why I mentioned monitoring the radar, looking at that satellite imagery. The Bureau uses those predictive systems as well as observing the system as it's moving. So we can see it on the satellite image, we can see it on the radar imagery, which helps us to then update our messaging, work with the community to make sure they have the best information they have up to date as possible.
Has there been a cyclone this slow before, and if so, what did that kind of bring?
There have been systems that have approached the southeast coast, the southeast Queensland coast, and in fact they have typically been erratic in their movement. In terms of the way they track either down the coast or across the coast, every single cyclone is different. Even a tropical low, even if it's not a cyclone, can produce extreme rainfall amounts.
You didn't predict the way it stalled. Is there a chance it could do that again and move eastward, or is that westward track still very certain?
The current westward track, and that is off the satellite image. That's not a model or an analysis. That's the analysis, I should say, of the satellite imagery. So that's the real situation now, and it is continuing that westward movement. So it did stall, and then it resumed that movement. That is the absolute latest information. When we look at the prediction, it continues to move west, and that is exactly what our warnings say, and we'll continue to update those as we need to.
Is there concern for inland communities as well?
There certainly is, as the system moves inland, particularly, as I said, on the southern side of the system. So for the scenic rim, for those places where you've both got topography and the sort of bands of rain around the cyclone are likely to wrap in, those inland areas, and the flood watches and warnings do extend to cover those areas.
Are there concerns that the strong winds could also last longer as it crosses?
Yeah, certainly if the system does stall, but typically as these systems approach and hit the coast, they are erratic, but they also weaken. Right? So if we've got a Category 2 system and it approaches the islands, it is likely that the system will start to weaken as it crosses. But as I've said, we need to watch these factors really carefully with the observed information and update the community as that happens.
I have this question for Peter or not, just around solar panels. What do people do with solar panels? Do they turn them off or do they leave them on?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Better practice is to turn the solar panels off, and some of them are on the inverters and also the switchboard. It's just in case you get roof damage, and you get roof damage and you decamp from your premises. You don't want that, that potentially live. It's not mandatory. It's just a really good safety thing to do. On Energex website, we've got some instructions on how to do that.
Should they be doing that now?
It's their choice. If you're at home and you think you're safe at the moment, you don't have to do it. But if you're going to decamp from your home, it's the last thing you'll think of. So, it's cloudy at the moment anyway. You're probably not generating much. But we'll put some guidance on our website because there's also been a bit of noise around that. We'd like to clear up. It's a safety matter.
You've spoken about social media rumours. Just to be clear, there'll be no preemptive cut to power.
No.
As this cyclone.
No.
It must be frustrating getting that type of messaging because these people, they're claiming to be workers with the company. It must be, and people are trying to get the information from all means. It must be frustrating.
Just go to a trusted site like the government's website or ours, and you know that that's not fake.
Premier. Couple for the Premier. Yeah, thanks. You spoke about bridges potentially shutting. What would be the trigger for that?
Well, there's systems in place, and I mentioned the gateway yesterday. Now, that's owned by a private company. They have trigger points when wind velocity gets to a certain rate, so that's their trigger point. I just make the observation, wherever possible, we want to keep roads open, but people have to uphold their end of the bargain, and that is when advice comes that things are reaching the point where it's dangerous to be outside, we'd really appreciate if people do the right thing. And that's, again, my role is to give people the information, and we'll give it as clearly and as concisely and as often as we can. I suspect I'll be back this afternoon, right? And people can then make an informed decision.
Premier, are you happy with the communications and sandbags?
Look, we'll work with councils wherever we can. And when we have the disaster management meetings, I'm a big believer that councils have to be on there. And on the back of that, we're able to iron out as many problems as possible. The work of and I have to thank the Minister for this, the way that Defence and the National Emergency Management were able to really pool resources here and get extra sandbags for those councils. That's what it's about. In a disaster, it's about everyone rowing in one direction. So we'll keep assisting them as much as we can.
You've spoken to the councils, have they told you they're going to reopen those?
All of that information is on the website, but my understanding is that every council has sandbag capacity today that's open, and I've just checked on the last one before we came here. And they'll take advice. We'll continue to give them the advice about as the system comes in. But at the moment, if Queensland has been given another little window to maybe do a little bit more sandbagging, and that's why we're trying to help councils as much as we can.
And looking ahead days and probably weeks, what sort of financial assistance might be available for residents and small business?
Cameron, it's a good question, and the reason why it's a good question is because now's the time for us to say to Queenslanders that our focus is on the response, but it has to immediately go to the recovery after the event. And one of the benefits of having the Minister here is that she's been part of the journey from the beginning. And it is really important, and we saw that in the floods in North Queensland. So as of today, right now, we still have teams of people from the Reconstruction Authority in Ingham and Townsville and Cardwell and all manner of other points doing the things that need to be done in that recovery. I spoke to the recovery coordinator yesterday up there. It's important that that work continues. So now's the time. So what was put in place yesterday with those local governments, it's effectively an amount of money that councils can, the moment there is damage, they're able to go and repair some of that key infrastructure so that it's not part of a squabble waiting to see whether or not they might be reimbursed. It's just an amount of money that they can go in instantly. So it has to be seamless. And if it's not, what happens is it means that individuals don't mobilise as quickly as possible. So if people see government not responding quickly, often there is a lag in how individuals do their response, and that's completely understandable. So our role is to make sure we do all the preparation, have all of the response, all the recovery there, and then it'll be up to Queenslanders to do their bit, and so far so good.
People have been getting warnings now for days.
Yeah.
They might be starting to get a bit complacent about this.
That's
cyclone.
right.
What would be your message to them?
Just stay in touch, keep in touch with the information, and we'll keep giving you the information. So, you know, we have seen the window for that crossing push out further later in the week. And the advice from authorities is that the system does continue to move here, and I see it as an opportunity just to go through and have a look at those systems one more time. Let's make sure that we've got everything in place from a government level, and for Queenslanders, just make sure that you've got everything in place as well.
Do you think authorities are taking this event seriously?
Again, we give the information. So yesterday, the alert was declared from the harbour master that there would be no boating from lunchtime yesterday. So that advice gets channelled out. And it's important that people, particularly those who might live on board their vessels, know that it's not the best place for you at the moment. All right, guys. Thanks very, very much.